I got it. We give everybody their own gremlin, and we have Hulk Hogan, and we do everything we ever wanted to do with a sequel. Hey everybody, Kyle Goethe here from Kyle and Nick on Film on YouTube and GoatFilmReviews.com. I'm coming at you again with another Why I Love Cinema episode, and today we're going to talk about one of my... It's tough to call it guilty pleasure because I don't actually think the film is bad. I feel like universally this film is not considered terrible, but it's always looked down on as the weaker of the two films in this franchise. And that film is Gremlins 2, The New Batch. I'm going to give you some reasons why I love the film today and run through some fun trivia about it as well, and try to give you a little bit of insight into why I think it's superior to the original film. That's right, superior to the original Gremlins. So let's get started with this. Y'all probably know the plot line. It's similar in terms of, like zaniness of Gremlin work. So basically, Zach Galligan returns as Billy Peltzer, and this time he is out of high school, into the workplace in New York City, working for the Clamp Corporation at Clamp Tower, which is very very topical, maybe. He's working, in this giant automized building, and comes across Gizmo. Gizmo's owner has died, and now Gizmo's stuck in New York City with nowhere to go, and desperately needs help. Billy gets kind of caught up in a tangled web and ends up unfortunately having to deal with gremlins again when Gizmo gets wet, and the entire Clamp Tower basically turns on everyone inside. Zaniness ensues to the nth degree, I guess I'll say. I'll just leave it at that. So why is this movie bad? I guess let's cover here. So the film doesn't have a terrible Rotten Tomatoes score. It actually has a 69%, which does mean it's fresh. It means more people liked it than didn't like it. From a critical standpoint, it doesn't have any Razzie nominations, nothing like flat out bad. This film just didn't connect with the fans. It was made 6 years after the original, and I just don't think people really were into the IP at that point. It's crazy because now if you made another Gremlins movie, I feel like it would do quite well. But 6 years after the original film, people were not going to connect with this. The film had a budget of $50 million and only made at the box office $41.5 million, which means if you want to do the math on it, it actually lost about $50 million because they don't include marketing in that original budget for the film, and the theaters probably keep about half of the income. So really, this movie lost probably close to about $50 million. That's pretty rough. So let's cover a few reasons why I think this movie is fantastic and why I love it. I just watched it last night again, and I watched the original Gremlins before that too because I really wanted to be able to come up with some really compare and contrast moments to this. The first thing I love about Gremlins 2, The New Batch, is the way that it expands on the mythology. Now, follow me here. The original Gremlins film does a great job of setting up a living mythology for Mogwais and the creatures. This film, I think, opens that up and expands upon that mythology by allowing the Gremlins to kind of take on more of a xenomorph alien style of life cycle where they actually retain properties a lot more. And I think it's fun to introduce the character of Dr. Catheter, played by Christopher Lee, who works at the Splice of Life genetic testing tenantry basically inside of Clamp Tower. And he's got all these different kind of animal tests that he's doing, and it's really weird and kind of monstery, and the gremlins get a hold of these different chemicals and drink them and turn into all sorts of wacky gremlins. Honestly, if you've seen the Key and Peele sketch on Gremlins 2, that's one of the reasons I absolutely adore the film. I kind of referenced it at the beginning here, but the idea that everybody gets to create their own gremlin, it does feel like that's almost how the board meeting probably went for this film. Yeah, I guess when it comes down to it for me is expanding on the mythology, being able to create different versions of the gremlins, being able to have like one that turns into like lightning and moves throughout the building in an electrical force. The one that grows like a superior brain and speaks English. The one who gets bat wings. We'll cover a bit of that fun stuff too. Being able to kind of like evolve. It's one of the things I really loved about the Alien franchise was expanding upon the mythology of the life cycle, and even the Tremors films from the early to 90s, I guess up until even now. how they add to the mythology, add to the life cycle. It kind of just, it gives you that grained, lived-in monster kind of a feeling that I think works really well with the Gremlins franchise. So, number one, it expands on the mythology. Kind of going hand in hand with that. Number two, the way it critiques itself in the same process as expanding that mythology. Because let's be honest, looking through the rules, so the Gremlins have 3 rules, which is don't get them wet, don't expose them to sunlight, and don't feed them after midnight. Fair enough. Starting just off in the film, when Billy's explaining these rules to the different people, trying to get the security team at Clamp Tower to understand what he's dealing with, he explains that you can't get them, you can't feed them after midnight. And then all the guys in the security tower kind of keep asking questions like, well, what happens if it eats on a plane that goes through a time zone? Does that somehow trigger the midnight thing? Or when does midnight really end? Like, you can't, it's kind of like, when I go to like parks for a walk late at night, or I did before this whole mess, and it says like park closes at 7, and it never says when the park opens. It's kind of the same thing. Like, when does it open? When can a gremlin eat breakfast? When exactly are they allowed to do that kind of stuff? I like that this film kind of makes fun of itself a little bit too, because it does kind of have a weird, strange, loose mythology with that. And this film kind of points that out, pokes fun at it, and then allows it to breathe on its own too. You also get things like in the original Gremlins film, Phoebe Cates' character, Kate, has this whole thing where she talks about her father dressed as Santa Claus, and it's a really weird monologue that appears somewhere in the latter half of the film, and just kind of like, it kind of just drops the film down. This film actually takes it and makes fun of that moment by her having another really odd monologue at the complete wrong time. It's not afraid to kind of call itself out. Leonard Maltin appears in this film, in Gremlins 2, as himself, critiquing the original Gremlins. Now, he was not a fan of the original film and kind of called it out and said it wasn't very good. Joe Dante, who directed both this film and the original Gremlins, brought him in actually to appear as himself, being attacked by Gremlins for his bad review of the film. I think that's just fantastic. I also think, like the way that he critiques both the original film and critiques sequel making itself. This is the only true sequel that Joe Dante has ever directed. Looney Tunes Back in Action, which he did in, I think, 2003, was seen in some ways as being kind of like a sequel, in-universe follow-up to Space Jam, but really it's kind of its own movie. So this is the only actual sequel that Joe Dante ever did. And you can tell he's kind of hitting on sequel tropes in the same way that 22 Jump Street did just a couple years back as well, only he did it decades before. It's interesting to note that Joe Dante didn't want to come back for the sequel unless he was given basically carte blanche. He was given complete creative control for this film, and that's what creates the film that we end up seeing. So that's another reason why I really love this movie, is it kind of critiques itself. It critiques sequels, doesn't take itself too seriously, which I think the first film tends to do, because it is wacky, it is zany, and it's a very strange mythology. So that's the other reason I like it. Critiques the original film. Number 3 reason, I like that it critiques the world. It kind of makes fun of our reliance on technology or the next new thing. The Clamp building is in many ways it's in many ways a representation almost of Billy's own father. Billy's father is inventing these wacky things in the original film. None of them seem to ever work, or they work for a little bit and they stop working. The Clamp building is very much in that way too. As they even enter it, there's supposed to be this automated rotating door thing that opens for you, and it never works quite right. It basically shoots someone into the building. So many different inventions and things going on in the Clamp Tower actually don't work in the same way that Billy's father's inventions don't work. So it's almost like that character has translated itself into a different medium for this film. And it also is very much a critique of these like loss of humanity jobs, if you will. There's a moment when Robert Picardo's character, Forster, who's the head of the security team, basically reprimands Billy for having a drawing at his desk and a potted plant at his desk, something to give him happiness at work. And it's almost like he's told, like, you don't get to have that. We don't get to have that. That's not part of our plan and our guide. It's not regulation. It's a critique. The Daniel Clamp character is in many ways, I think maybe not to get political, but a more likable version of the very person he's making fun of. Clamp Tower Daniel Clamp, Dan Clamp, Don Clamp. The way it kind of critiques him too is he's a guy who's very out of touch with his employees, who's kind of interested in just having his name on a bunch of things and having his brand associated. And I mean, like tearing down Gizmo's owner's home basically so that he can build his own version of Chinatown, which in many ways is silly because there's no cultural aspect to it. He likes the brand, he likes the name, he likes the piece of it. I love that it critiques so many things about kind of like the world that was the early 1990s and how we were kind of moving forward as a society. A lot of these things are still prevalent today, so I really do love the way that it does that, and it does it to a tongue-in-cheek, doesn't take itself too seriously film. If this was a film that offended you, you kind of would get over it. So that's another thing I like about it, critiques the world it's in. Number 4 reason why I love Gremlins 2, The New Batch, is I think it has better characters than the original film. And that's not to say that the original film doesn't have great characters, but I just really like the new additions that are in the film. Of course, we get Billy Peltzer back, we get Kate back, but again, John Glover as Daniel Clamp is a great new character, and he's, again, more likable than you would have him believe, and he kind of has this arc that makes him more likable because he really just kind of this bumbling fool. Very funny, and John Glover, it's kind of like he's a secret ingredient. You add him to a film, it's going to make the film better. He even makes his one scene in Batman and Robin better. Robert Prosky appearing as Grandpa Fred, and basically being, like he's very like a Svengoolie or male Elvira, you will, character that does these like midnight movie things too, and he's got this like emotional arc to him too, that he's always wanted to be a reporter. He's always wanted to be a columnist, a guy who's on like the actual like a face of a news piece, or like someone who really brings gravitas to his work. But he also is stuck with this goofy, silly, dumb, I guess, midnight movie job. And he doesn't hate the midnight movie job. He just wishes it was more in line with the classics. There's a great scene where Billy's asking why he doesn't show Dracula and Frankenstein. He said, well, Mr. Clamp doesn't like anything in black and white. He wants it in full color. Again, critiquing the world where people don't see black and white cinema anymore because it's in color or it's not worth watching. There's even a great line where the building announces later on the channel it's going to be Casablanca in full color with a happier ending. So again, like the Grandpa Fred character is very cool, and the way he kind of like works his way through the story is very interesting. Robert Picardo as Forrester, Christopher Lee. I've got a great story about Christopher Lee. I'll tell you guys during our trivia section, but him appearing as Dr. Catheter. Christopher Lee, just like John Glover, is just a secret ingredient. You add him to a film and it's going to make a bad film better, and it's going to make a great film even more superior. I love the new characters all about, and there's tons more characters that I'm not even talking about of varying degrees of success, but I just think all the new additions to the cast fit the film very well. All right, so we come to our last reason why I love Gremlins 2, and it's kind of an amalgam of all the other reasons that I have, but I just got to mention, this film is perhaps the best personified piece of kitchen sink film I've ever seen. Joe Dante took everything he could and threw it at the screen to see what sticks, and I think it works really well. And the best part is, it's so wacky, it's so over the top, that even if something doesn't work for you, you brush past it because in 30 seconds there's some other visual sight gag being made here. Even just like I said, Joe Dante didn't want to come back for a sequel unless he was given creative control, and he was given it. And I can't think of any time where that would happen nowadays, especially with a $50 million budget, which back then was ridiculously high compared to now. It's even now more than I think a studio would just give someone with creative control. So he decided to take all that. He opens the film with a Looney Tunes-esque sequence. He actually got Chuck Jones to come out of retirement to animate a new sequence that was Looney Tunes themed to open the film up, that gives the film its anachronistic tone. It really kind of like, it really opens up that whole world and says, this is what this movie is going to be, and I think that's very successful. So, yeah, all the different kinds of Gremlins things. The fact that Hulk Hogan appears in the film when the Gremlins eat the actual film that it's in, and he tells them to stop, is one of the best fourth wall breaking jokes I've ever seen. Easily better than anything that was in the Deadpool films. I'm sorry, deal with that. Hulk Hogan attacking Gremlins, way better. But just all the things that he throws into the film, it's so chock full of fun that I think, yeah, just grab yourself a drink and watch the film, and you will find yourself pleasantly enjoying most of it, if not all of it, like myself. Okay, guys, those are my 5 reasons why I loved Gremlins 2: The New Batch. Again, we'll talk about how it expands on the mythology, how it critiques itself, how it critiques the world around us, the great new characters added to the film, and its personification is a kitchen sink film. Everything is thrown at it except the kitchen sink, and maybe there's even a kitchen sink in there too. So those are my 5 reasons why I love the film. I want to know your reasons for loving it or your reasons for not loving it if you indeed didn't. All right, guys, we're at that point of the show where I'm going to tell you my 60 seconds of fun facts about Gremlins 2: The New Batch. So all right, let's get going. So Christopher Lee, who appeared in the film as Dr. Catheter, his first thing that he did when he actually got the role was he apologized to Joe Dante for appearing in Howling 2: Your Sister is a Werewolf, a very terrible sequel to a film Joe Dante directed. Lee's portrayal of Dracula is also referenced several times when the Bat Gremlin appears, and there's even some deleted scene footage where they talk about them drinking blood. Howie Mandel voices Gizmo in the original film and this sequel. It's really kind of fun news to hear. Roger Ebert critiqued this film, saying it was not different enough from the original, which I don't even understand because it's so crazily different from the original film. Anyway, get past it. I love Roger Ebert. That's a really weird take on it. Dick Miller worked with Joe Dante 23 times, appearing in every single project that he was able to with Joe Dante. He also appeared with actor Robert Picardo, who was in this film with him 11 times on film. It's a crazy, staggering amount of collaborations with another person. The messenger in the film, who is played by Raymond Cruz, is most well known for playing Tuco Salamanca in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He appears in a ton of other stuff, including Seinfeld as the busboy. Chuck Jones came out of retirement. We already talked about that one. And John Glover has played 4 different DC characters in Shazam, Batman and Robin, Smallville, and the Riddler in the animated series. I know I went a few seconds over. Deal with it. All right, guys, thank you so much for that. Got that out of my system. We're good. All right. So that's it for the episode, guys. Thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate getting a chance to talk with y'all about some of my favorite films that are less loved or less liked or maybe even downright hated. So if you guys like the episode, please give this episode a like. Comment below your thoughts on Gremlins 2. If you get the chance to rewatch it, I think it's on IMDb TV right now, which is a free streaming service offered by IMDb with some films. So give it yourself another watch, or if you've never seen it before, it's worth at least checking out. If you hate it, you know what? Great. At least you know that. So I want to know your thoughts on the film. Make sure to comment below what you think of Gremlins 2: The New Batch. Do you think it's superior to the original film? Is there someone out there who does? I know Joe Dante, the director, did. Anyway, and one other thing too, we've got a Patreon, guys. If you want to click the link down in the description below, we got some information on our Patreon page, and you guys can join up there for as cheap as $1 a month. And then you can even have some say in some of the films that we decide when Kyle and Nick on Film returns, hopefully very soon. Because I really miss having a partner at the desk when we talk about these kinds of films. It's really fun to talk with Nick Palatichuk, and it'd be fun to actually do that again soon. So take care of yourselves so that we can. If you can't join the Patreon, times are tough for some people. We do appreciate sharing the video. You've got tons of social media. Share this video and let people know about it. And subscribe if you want more content like this. I know I'm going to keep bringing you content as long as I'm here. Because hey, it's how I'm getting through this, just like anyone else. We all have our little things we need to get through this. So thank you guys for joining me so much. I really appreciate it. That's it.